In a world of big data, it's certainly changed the environment into which we invest in property and, more importantly, how we do our research. So if I rewind back some 20 years ago, there was really only 3 or 4 data collection agencies that we could use. So I think there was Residex, there was RP Data, and of course realestate.com. But the way that we really searched for our properties was more about walking the street and visiting the individual real estate offices or getting the paper and sitting there and circling the houses that we were interested in, then starting to do our diligence that way. But along comes data and the advent of technology and how fast we've managed to perfect this data collection. And it's really given us some opportunities to be able to take some shortcuts, if you will, to get to that endpoint in terms of research. Now, once again, in a world of big data, we've got so many things at our fingertips which we can utilize. Now, I've mentioned RP Corelogic and On the House Homesales domain and the like. They're really, really good platforms to give you a lot of free information. Now, clearly we know what the price is, if there is a price. We can do 3D floor plans. We can have a look at the individual photos. Sometimes there's even videos or professional videos on there. And it also gives us the ability to be able to zoom in and use Google's road maps or street views, if you like, where we can go up and down the street and around the block and get a pretty good indication of what's surrounding the house. And then, of course, there's the satellite imagery as well, which we're looking for any imperfections such as railway lines or high-tension power poles or sewerage pumps or overflow paths, whatever it may be. We've got the ability now to be able to really dial in the information that we require. But having said all of that, I'm still a massive fan of ground truth. In fact, nothing beats ground truth. The data's really, really good, but it should only be used as an indication in the direction to which you should go. You shouldn't bet the house, so to speak, on actual data alone. So once you've got some indication of where you should be going, start to dig deep on the ground truth components. So here are a couple of things that when we go to an area, especially in its beginning stages, when we're trying to identify a potential investment area, and we've already gone through the data and it's steered us in this particular direction, here are some things that we like to look at that gives us perhaps an opportunity to overlay ground truth over the data numbers that we have. And the very first thing is actually shopping centres. Now, we actually go to the shop. I'm not talking about where they are or how many there are or how big they are even, but more about who's in the shopping centre. Now, as general and simple as this sounds, by actually going to the local shopping centre, walking through the car parks to see how full it is, the type of cars that are there, and then into the actual shopping centre, sitting in the coffee lounge and just observing, can actually pay massive dividends for you. You'll get to see how much money generally is being spent in the shopping centre, because that's a component of perhaps disposable income. You'll get to see the type of things that are being purchased, and of course you'll get to see the demographic as well. Now, the next thing we like to look at is actually the real estate agent. So back to the future, if you will, where we go to the individual real estate agents and have a conversation with them. Because the one thing data lacks is actually relationships. Data's just very clinical, it's black and white. And at the end of the day, real estate is still a people industry. So we like to have that communication one-on-one, face-to-face with the real estate agent. And there's some really good bits of information that you'll get out by creating these relationships. So we're creating a relationship with the real estate agent now, and here are some of the bits of information that you're going to be looking for them to provide you. And the very first thing we like to look at is the actual vacancy rate. Now, on one hand, we've got our data that's telling us that the general vacancy rate is, let's call it 3% for an area. But that area is actually quite large. It might be a council area. Very rarely will you actually be able to obtain the data that's relevant to a suburb, relevant to a street, relevant to a property type. So by us walking the streets and then talking to each individual property manager from the different real estate agencies, we get to find out is A, how many properties do they manage? And B, how many have they got vacant now, which gives us an absolute immediate indication of what the vacancy rate is. Plus we get to know the property types that they deem, being the local area experts, will rent better than anything else. Back to the sales agent though, however, we get to find out the raw live data, because once again, data's sometimes a little stale, it's a little old, it can be months old, so to speak. By talking to the agent, we're getting real-time data in terms of days on market, important factor, types of properties that like to be rented, or the most fluid, liquid types of property sales in the different areas. So it gives us a really, really good indication of where and what we should do next once we've created the relationship. And the third one is, and it's not limited to, but the third one is actually comparing comparables, apples for apples. So we have this mega roll of data that we have in front of us comparing days on market, average sales for houses, 1-bedders, 2-bedders, 3-bedders, 4-bedders, double lock-up garages, and we can dial that right into a street-by-street scenario. Now, once we have this collection of data, we actually like to drive past all the houses, as well as combining it with the information that the agents have told us in why particular properties sold cheaper than others, or why they sold for more. So here's some really good examples. Often when you read data, you'll see these out-of-line sales. Now, let's assume that out-of-line sale is, the average for the area is 500,000, but there's 2 or 3 properties that have a sprinkling of sale results of 400,000 with a $500,000 average. There's usually a story behind that. Now, if you just rely upon raw data, that's not going to give you the story. And the story might be something as simple as the property had structural problems. It was sold to a family member, perhaps. Perhaps it really wasn't a 4-bedroom home. It was 3 bedrooms plus a study, but it was advertised as 4 bedrooms and the data says so. So there's actually no truth behind the data to give you these averages. So by walking the streets or driving past all the houses, you'll get to know the truth behind the data. And the agents will tell you. It's amazing if you if you ask the right questions and then say nothing, the amount of information you'll get is astonishing. But it's all come back to the relationship. Absolutely important. So, in closing, data is a great indicator of where you should go, but it's certainly not the be-all and end-all. In fact, for me, ground truth is the be-all and end-all. You combine the two, overlay each other, and it'll make for a sound decision going forward in terms of property investing.